Good morning, everybody. Or if you're watching this as a recording, thank you for tuning in, no matter what time of the day it is, no matter where you are, and no matter what you've got going on. We're going to spend the next couple of hours talking a little bit about meditation, about mindfulness, but mainly we're going to talk about stress. My name is Mandy Trapp, and I'm the founder and the lead educator at Lifestyle Meditation. And oh, somebody can't hear anything. Here I go. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me now? I've got it going on. So hopefully you can hear me right now. Yes. Okay, great. Thanks, Ella. I was waiting to see everybody's little pictures pop on here, but I'm realizing now that I cannot see you. So I'm going to try to stay open to be able to notice where the questions pop up here, even if that means I have to tap the screen. So, all right, back to me. My name is Mandy Trapp, and I am the founder and the lead educator in Edmonton here for a company called Lifestyle Meditation. We were founded almost 9 years ago in 2012. I have been personally teaching meditation and mindfulness for 20 years. It's not necessarily where I started. I started my career as an athletic trainer, as a personal fitness trainer, and I started teaching yoga very quickly into that just over 20 years ago. And what I realized very, very quickly into my journey is that everybody was coming into the gym in, I'm going to call it their costume, some in business suits, some in hockey gear, some in everyday street clothes. But something very interesting happened when people went into the change room and they came back out in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. And everybody started to look the same. And in a way, it started to disarm, a lot of the judgments and the boundaries and the barriers that we have about each other. And I just got to meet the human, and the humans got to meet the human in there. There were guys, that were playing pro hockey, and then there were stay-at-home moms that were in there as well. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences, I think, on a human level that I had ever experienced, where people were just allowing themselves to be people. And in that, there was a very interesting observation that I had. I realized very, very quickly that as human beings, we all share some very core and fundamental needs. And as soon as you start to get people to move their bodies around, and specifically when you start putting them in very vulnerable positions, it's quite interesting what comes out of their mouth. A lot of the thoughts that they have, the fears that they have, the anxieties that they have, the joys, everything that they want to celebrate. And I was really in that arena for almost a solid 15 years. And I could probably narrow it down to anywhere from 5 to 10 very core needs that everybody has, every kind of core stories that everybody has. And I realized more than anything is that as we start to move our bodies, we move beyond the layer of the physical into that layer of mental and emotional. And that is really where most of our needs are being met. For the majority of people in this corner of the world, we have a lot of those basic physical needs being met, such as food and water, although sometimes it feels like, okay, I'm getting hungry and I need to feed myself. So it feels like it's not being met. But many of us, especially if you're watching this, don't necessarily know what it feels like to go days and days on end right now without food. So we have a lot of those basic needs being met. And yet a lot of those same reactions that we have with response to, I'm just going to call it the fight or flight, kind of that hunter gatherer going out scrounging, for sustenance and nourishment within our bodies, is that we have that very innate response that's built into us that allows us the courage, the strength to be able to go and to meet those needs. Because we don't have to necessarily meet these physical needs, we're still recognizing that a lot of these responses, this drive, these courageous acts are still taking place on a day-to-day basis, but they're not there to meet those physical needs. They're there to meet what is underneath all of that, which are those mental and those emotional needs that we have. And we share these needs. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're at in this world. It doesn't matter if you're 2 or I say 92 or 102, is that there are also, beyond just the food and the water and the physical safety, there are, again, these core mental and emotional needs that we have. And when we kind of really dig into what is the traditional kind of definition of what stress is that it really is just a response or a reaction that takes place in the mind and in the body to one of those needs not being met. Now, if we can take a lot of the physical needs off of the table and we can look at the mental and emotional needs, we start to ask ourselves, okay, so what are some of those needs? Well, we have, depending on where you look at it, again, probably 5 to 10, but I have pulled from a lot of different sources and resources, from um, philosophers to, I would say, psychotherapists, to a lot of more traditional psychology nowadays. And we can kind of narrow it down to 5 core mental and emotional needs that we have. Okay, so that first need that we have is that need for mental and emotional safety. Okay, so this just goes beyond, making sure that my physical self is safe. But now we're getting into, how do I make sure that I feel mentally safe? And this is playing itself out huge right now. Why? Because we are so plugged into these things. From the moment that you wake up first thing in the morning, most people, this is their first communication with the outside world. Right? So before you have human to human contact, most of us are checking our phones. We're reading the news that's on there. We're going onto social media. We are taking in the entire world through our 5 senses. And the moment that we don't feel safe, there's a little messenger that starts to kind of make a little bit of noise in the back of the brain, known as the amygdala. I often refer to it as your guard dog. And that guard dog starts barking. And it says, oh, I'm not safe because now the government is saying this, or, oh, there's more cases of COVID that are being reported, or, oh, there's, a protest that's happening, and, somehow that impacts my own need to feel safe as I'm sitting here, truthfully looking around safe in my bed, and yet this doesn't feel safe. Right. And then as we start to interact, or we begin to engage in that, maybe it's making comments, or making a post and people commenting back at us, attacking us, our perspectives, our beliefs, our whatever our viewpoints that we have. Again, this begins to amplify that feeling or that thought that we have of, I am not safe. So the body goes into the exact same reaction as though we are walking through the bushes and we come face to face with a bear. We go into fight or flight. We're all very familiar with this fight or flight response, because it's where all of a sudden we begin to mobilize large amounts of energy very rapidly in our body, so that we have the strength to fight against whatever that threat is. Okay. And I don't always mean fight is to put up your fists. Fight sometimes is to have the courage to be able to speak, and to be able to stand up for what it is that you believe in, or to stand up for yourself. Okay. So we need enough energy and strength to do that, or to run away, right? And to run as far and as fast as we can without getting tired. So in that moment, think about it, that you're opening up your social media, you read something that had happened this weekend, or, you made a Father's Day post yesterday, and, somebody decided to, attack you or to bring something up on your social media that triggers this lack of safety within you. Just begin to notice, what is that chain reaction for you in your body? And usually it skips beyond the thought and the belief. We don't even pay attention to this because it is so deep seated in our programming that we immediately go into the physical reaction of that. All right. So we all have this. We have this need for mental and emotional safety. The next is the need for unconditional love. The unconditional love. And I don't mean the kind of love that's like, oh, if you do this for me, then I'm going to love you even more. I'll love you forever. And I had a really interesting aha about this. I would say quite some time ago. So I have 3 children, and they're all teenagers now. And I remember one time when we were sitting at the dinner table, they were probably about 5, 7, and 9 at the time. And one of my kids saying to me, Mom, who do you love the most? And I kind of made a joke because I'm a super sarcastic person. And I said, well, of course I love the one the most that gets up and does the dishes first. And I had a little laugh about it. My husband had a little laugh about it. But within about 35 seconds, I see these 3 little kids jump up from the table, run towards the dishwasher, and they're pushing each other, and they're pulling hair, and they're doing all of these things to fight to get those dishes in there first. Why? Because I had planted the seed within them unconsciously, right, unknowingly, that in order to deserve my love and to be worthy of as much love as I could possibly give, that you had to do something for me, right? And it's a really funny and kind of a very benign example. And yet this is a part of our programming, right? Is that we live and we exist in a culture that is very transactional. And I even know for myself, if somebody does something really kind for me, unsolicited, out of the blue, is that I used to always take stock of, oh, I need to make sure that I pay that person back for that. Or I have to, I'll get lunch next time. Or if somebody pays me a compliment, I can't just say thank you. I have to give it back. Because why in the world would I be worthy and deserving of your love if I didn't do anything to earn that? Right? So any moment that you are not feeling loved unconditionally, that you feel that you have to constantly do something to measure up or to pay back, and specifically if it's in a really tender or sensitive situation, again, that little guard dog in the back of your brain, your amygdala starts to fire and it says, you're not loved. This is a threat. Right? This is a threat to your survival because we require cooperation and unconditional collaboration for us to survive as a species. So it's built into both of us. So you don't feel loved, and what happens? We go into fight or flight. Body mobilizes large amounts of energy very rapidly to get you ready. Right? Okay. The third, and I have always said, for many years that I've been teaching this, and I think it's very, very obvious now, is the third need that we all share is the need for belonging and for connection. And I don't just mean being around people, because a lot of us can be around people. We can be around people at work every day. We can be around people even when we are, with our family or at a family reunion. We can be around people at the mall. But it doesn't mean that we feel connected. It doesn't mean that we feel relevant. And it does not mean that we feel like we belong. There's something a little bit deeper that is required. And a lot of research would point us to believing those that share a common experience or a common interest or a common suffering, right, or a common aspiration, if you will, is that is what creates connection. There's an incredible psychologist out of the United States by the name of Sebastian Junger, and he wrote a book called Tribes. And within this book of Tribes, really what he was summarizing is he was summarizing many, many years that he spent, I believe it was close to 30, traveling overseas to the Middle East with the US military and really doing a lot of psychological evaluations. And more than anything, just to kind of see where were those seeds of post-traumatic stress disorder first planted, and how can we, if at all, try to maybe heal that or mend that before they come back home to the US and it becomes this, very big problem to deal with. And what he actually realized time and time again is that when a lot of these soldiers were in these high stress situations, right? They're in these tents, sleeping shoulder to shoulder, a few guys staying awake, bombs flying overhead, is that in fact, they didn't show any signs or symptoms of stress whatsoever, or not stress, I should say, but of this traumatic stress disorder. They didn't show any symptoms of depression. They were not in any way, shape, or form displaying anything remotely close to what so many of them struggle with. And a lot of them eventually, cause them to take their lives when they come back home. So when they're together within that collective experience, it would seem that they are connected and that they belong to one another and that they're actually helping each other to navigate a lot of the stress that is happening. It's not until they come back home and into their families who love them and, are there to receive them and to take care of them. But it's not until they come back that they start to really display a lot of these symptoms. And what Junger, into a lot of his research to, that unconditional love and maybe more physical and psychological safety, is that they don't necessarily feel that they connect to the people that are around them because they have not had that shared experience. That they don't really understand, what they have gone through and who they are and the depths and the levels of their suffering. They just simply can't meet them there. Right. And so again, in these moments where we are not feeling like we belong, where we are not feeling that deep sense of connection, and dare I even say intimate connection, is that again, we have that amygdala, that guard dog that starts to go off. And there are going to be times where this is amplified. Right now, during COVID time, this is happening. This is rampant because where we have found a lot of our connections, we have been forced to disconnect them. We have been forced to stay home, to maintain all of our distancing and all of our spaces. And not to really get into this here, but I mean, because that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down, but there is so much other research that really points to the fact that connection isn't something that can necessarily be fulfilled like this. I mean, this is a great way for us to be able to see each other and learn from each other, but that there is something very key that is missing when we are not face to face and when we are not energetically exchanging our own frequency. Right? So we used to believe that the majority of communication was nonverbal. We would study body language. We would say, what's really happening if I see somebody's arms that are closed or if they're open and they're leaning in? And now actually what we're starting to see is that it moves. They were right, but it's actually not so much about the position of the body. It's the energy that is being shared from pardon me. And we know how it feels when, we really want to connect with somebody that we love very much, and we can feel that there's a wall that's been put up. And even though they might be leaning in and saying, no, I'm here for you, you're like, no, there's something that is different between both of us right now. And it's a feeling. So it's very difficult, again, to be able to put into words and explain. But again, we are all here to become more mindful, to recognize what are my triggers into this stress response and this fight or flight response. And one of the questions you can ask yourself is, do I feel in this moment like I don't belong? Do I feel like I'm not connected? Right? So that is that third need. The fourth and the fifth needs that we have, that we all share, are very, very close, I believe, to one another, although of course they have their differences. And the first is the need to be seen. And I mean, like, to really be seen for in this moment, not for who you were 5 years ago when you did that thing or when you made that mistake, not for who you were when you were 5 years old. And this can be particularly hard. And I hear a lot of my students or a lot of my clients say to me, God, I feel like I'm doing so well with all of this, personal growth and all of my mental health work until I go and spend time with my family. And I feel the same way. In a lot of ways, I feel the same way. All I have to do is go to my parents on Sunday night for dinner, or go to my in-laws for Christmas dinner, or to a family reunion, to remind myself all of the ways that I feel, disconnected, or like a black sheep, or, like maybe I'm not doing a good enough job. And a lot of the reason for that is because every single one of us, the moment that we meet somebody, we create a relationship with them, and we create a relationship with them that's like taking a photo, right? So we all, again, have access to these devices. And so if you have a photo of yourself, let's say, with somebody that you met for the first time that has since become your best friend 10 or 20 years later, do you ever notice how you will continue often to revert back to, hey, remember when we did that? Or remember when we did this? And we really work on the past because it's an easy thing for us to ground into. Because when I know who you are and when you know who I am, it creates that sense of safety and consistency in our relationship. But as you start to change and to grow, and maybe you're changing on your career path, or maybe you were married for years and now you're going through a divorce and you're really starting to explore who you are, whatever it is that you're doing, we're always in a state of change and growth. And that means that those that are in some sort of a relationship to us, it really requires them to continue to find us where we're at. And it can be hard for people to do that. Recalibration or that realignment can be very difficult. And because of that, for us, it's like we spend a lot of our time defending not who I was, but who I am and who I am becoming. And because of that, again, we have this amygdala, or this guard dog, that's going off when we don't feel that we're being seen for who we are now. That says, hey, this is a threat to your survival. This is a threat to your evolution, because people aren't going to see you here. So what happens? We go into the fight or flight response, right? Heart rate begins to increase, right? We start to sweat, the blood pressure goes up, our digestion starts to feel a little off, we start to feel queasy, we start to hold all of that tension in the muscles and in the body. Doesn't feel so good, does it? The last of those 5 needs that we all share is the need to feel heard. And I mean heard for, what is it that I'm really saying, not what you think I'm saying. We get into a lot of these arguments, and this is probably, hopefully, the last time I'm going to point to this thing today. Think about how much of your communication takes place through email or through text. It's really funny, actually, what we've come up with now, because people were having a really hard time getting their point across, right? What is it that's really trying to be said right now? What is it that I'm really wanting you to hear? And because, again, so much of our communication is energetic and there's a greater context to it, if people don't really hear you, like, I mean, like really compassionately hear you, we start to put on the caps locks. And then maybe if I type all in capital letters, they'll hear me. Right? And then they don't hear me. Well, now if I start to put a whole bunch of emojis in, they'll really hear what I'm trying to say. No? Okay, well, maybe now if I put in a GIF or a GIF, an animated video, they'll hear what I have to say. The truth is that if you're having a hard time, people really hearing what your message is, it's because it's never going to happen virtually. Is that we are so required to be face to face with each other. The greatest part about hearing is also allowing ourselves to be great listeners. I always think about Stephen Covey, and it's in his whole piece around, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So if I want somebody to hear my message, is that I have to begin to understand, what is their message, right? How can we find a common ground where we can meet each other in all of this as well? All right. So we have 5 needs. We have 1 reaction to when these needs are not being met. You can call it the fight or flight response. We can simply call it the stress response. Harvard University did a study almost 20 years ago. And in this study, what they realized is that for the everyday average person, they were going into the fight or flight response 15 to 20 times a day, meaning that 15 to 20 times a day, the brain was sending the message to the rest of the body that this is a threat to my survival. Right? So somewhere along the line, as we have evolved, we kind of forgot to tell ourselves that a lot of the times that these psychological needs are not being met. It's not necessarily a need of survival. Might be more of a need of survival of my reputation, survival of my career, survival of my inclusion within this community. But nonetheless, it is going off, or it was going off, I shall say, 15 to 20 times a day, almost 20 years ago. Almost 20 years ago. And so if you think about this again, and yes, Angela, I'm going to share that for you right now. 20 years ago, we did not have smartphones. We had flip phones, right? We had little small Nokia phones. Now we have access to the entire world, and the entire world has access to us. So there's a really good chance that these 5 needs are being triggered far more than that. So here's what the 5 needs are for all of you. The first one is the need for safety. And right next to these, you can actually write psychological needs, okay? Or in brackets, mental and emotional needs. So these are your 5 psychological needs. So the need for safety. We have the need for unconditional love. We have the need for belonging, okay? Belonging, sometimes I say connection. We have the need to feel seen, and we have the need to feel heard, okay? So safety, unconditional love, belonging and connection, seen and heard. All right. So yes, write those down. And the reason that I'm going to encourage you to write these down is because now that we start to become more mindful, and I can't wait, I'm going to take you all through a meditation practice here right now so you can actually start to do some of this work, is that so many people think that meditation it's a 5-minute vacation from the world, right? Or a 10-minute vacation. Like, let me just close my eyes, shut my door, pop my earbuds in. I don't want to think about anything. And while that is true, as it is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but it is going to allow you to step out. Really, really what is happening when we are practicing meditation is that we're settling all of those reactions in the body. And as we settle the reactions in the body, we get to become far more aware or far more mindful about what is happening in the mind. This includes our thoughts, this is our beliefs, these are our judgments, our preconceived ideas that we have about the world. When we can become more aware of what the mind is doing, we're not shutting it off, we can just be more aware of what's happening. Now, when we become more aware, when we're back in activity in the world, the moment that you start to notice yourself going into this stress response, right? So sometimes you'll notice that, oh, my heart is speeding up, or you'll notice my hands are starting to get sweaty, my mouth is starting to get dry, or my stomach doesn't feel very good right now, okay? Or my head feels tight. The moment that you start to feel all of those symptoms of stress, you can pause and you can ask yourself, is this in fact, right now, this response is going up, is this in fact a threat to my survival? What is it? Whatever's happening here. Maybe you're stuck in a traffic jam and you're late to get somewhere. Okay. Maybe you're asked to go on stage and to do some public speaking. Maybe you open up your phone and somebody sends you a text message and you notice this happening. First question, is this in fact a threat to my survival? So if the answer is yes, you go, okay, thank God, because that will happen for you within about 2.5 seconds. Then if the answer is yes, good, because we have this entire reaction that is built into all of us that is going to help you to get through that. Please know that that stress response is not there to take you down, it's there to take you through. It is always there to take you through. And so if we need that energy to get through, everything within that mechanism is there to help you to move the energy. Now, the problem is that most of the time, 99.9%, it's not a threat to our survival. The body goes through the exact same reaction. The brain and the mind goes through the exact same reaction. And then we get to say, so if this isn't a threat to my survival, then which one of these 5 needs is feeling threatened right now? Do I not feel safe? Do I not feel unconditionally loved? Do I not feel connected? Do I not feel seen? Do I not feel heard? Okay, so that's going to be the next question. So you can write that down. So which one of these 5 needs is that? So the third question that you ask then is this true? Is this true? Okay, so I'm often feeling like I'm running around in my car late to get to the next meeting and the next. And part of it's owning a business and part of it's being a mom. And part of it is just being in the world that we're in. And so I notice where I get a lot of stress is when I feel that, I'm rushing to get somewhere and the traffic is slow or there's construction or something. So I can say, is this a threat to my survival? Well, no, obviously not. What is this a threat to? This is a threat to. And it took me a really long time because I used to tell one of my teachers who's has a doctorate in psychotherapy, and he's the one actually who had first shared his version of these 5. And these 5, by the way, are a bit of a condensed version that come from a lot of different studies and traditions, that this comes from more of a psychotherapy approach. But I would say, I think that you've missed one. I think that the 6th need is the need to be on time. And he would laugh and he would say, Mandy, I'm just going to encourage you, when you feel that you're running late to be somewhere, just ask yourself, why am I so worried or concerned or anxious about not arriving on time? And I realized for me, it's because it was that need of belonging. Is that I could remember certain times in my life where I was late and either the meeting had already started or school had already started or the party had already started. Or when I was in 4th grade and we moved from a very small town into the city, and we came, at the first of the year. So halfway through the year, we, started whatever, January 1st. And I was the last one. I was the new kid. And there was definite, trauma is a really heavy word, but there were definite seeds that were planted within me that it's very uncomfortable and it's very unfavorable to be the last one there. And so these programs are always getting triggered constantly throughout the course of the day. And so when I'm driving in my car and I start to feel myself getting stressed out and I say, is this a need for my survival? No. Okay. What is this a need for? Okay. It's for belonging and connection. Well, is this true right now? Is this true that if I arrive there late to my parents on Sunday night for dinner, because my mom said, be here at 5, or, to that meeting or the one that I'm leading an event right now for 500 people and I have to go on stage and I'm going to be 5 minutes late. Is this true that I'm not going to belong and I'm not going to feel connected? And if the answer is no, of course that's not true. Right? Your mom or your friends aren't going to ostracize you for being late. Then it's incredible how that response begins to diffuse itself almost automatically. Why? Because we don't believe it anymore, right? Is that everything that is happening within your body at all times, your body is eavesdropping on what is playing out, the narrative that is playing out in your mind, right? So if your mind starts to tell you the story, uh-oh, this is a threat, or uh-oh, this is really good, then the body goes, oh, okay, well, we need to prepare ourselves to participate in whatever this thought or this belief is. When you don't believe something to be true anymore, and you start to flip that and you start to reverse it, then the body begins to follow suit as well. All right, so that is the value in asking if this is true. And then if we actually say, no, maybe this is true. Maybe I will not belong because a part of this is if you arrive late, we're going to lock the doors and you don't get to be here. Right. And we all exist in different arenas and forums where that is true, is that if you're late, you're not allowed in. And then we can say, is this true? Well, yeah, then I won't belong. And how do I know that this is true? Well, because that's part of their policy, is that they lock the doors and they don't let people in. And then we can sit in that. We can sit in that and saying, so what do I want to do about that? What do I want to do about that? Will I still be okay? Am I still safe? Am I still solid? Am I still grounded? Can I still find belonging somewhere else? Right? Can I still find safety somewhere else? Can I still find unconditional love somewhere else? Can I still find other ways to feel seen and heard in other places and in other forums? This is the true definition of resiliency. Right? When we talk about stress resiliency, it is not only our ability to prepare for stress, but to adapt to these stressful situations in finding new pathways. If we look at the nature outside of our doors right now, we realize that a river, for example, that if, a huge tree, let's say, or there's a rock slide that happens that dams up the river, is the river does not cease to flow. The river will begin to find new pathways. Why? Because for the survival of the river is it needs to keep moving. For your survival, you also need to keep moving. You need to have these needs being met at all times. And so we can find different ways to do that. Now, as we're working our way into living a more mindful life, and again, that's what meditation allows us to do, is that if we begin to realize that again and again and again, I am feeling stressed, trying to meet my need of belonging in this arena, and it just is simply not happening no matter what. As I'm beginning to look for other places to be able to do that, I want to make sure that, as hokey as this sounds, you guys, that I'm making that choice with my hand on my heart and my hand on my gut, because I want to get out of my head. I want to get out of the language of it, and I want to get into my instinct and what feels right. Right? We all know that gut feeling. We need to learn how to trust that a little bit more, because a lot of us have had, very strong gut feelings in our lives that we've trusted. And after the fact, we go, thank God that I trusted that, right? Because things ended up working out. Or we've had that gut feeling that we haven't trusted. And in the end, we go, God, I wish that I would have just gone with my gut on that, because that's what I was going to do. And then I didn't. And it didn't work out the way that I really wanted it to work out. So in those moments when now it's up to us to make a new choice or a new decision or find a new pathway, is that finding that new pathway requires mindfulness, it requires awareness, and it requires us to be able to tap into our instinct and our intuitions when we're looking for new ways to do this. All right. So I hope that that's making sense for you so far. So for those of you that are on here, does anybody have a question right now? I just really want to set the stage for, it's so funny, like, how are we going to get to meditation? And the truth is, as I've been teaching this for 20 years, and I have yet to meet somebody who comes to meditation because everything in their life is really awesome and they can't wait for it to be even more awesome. Thank you, Samantha. The truth is that we come to these types of practices because there's something that we either want to stop because it is uncomfortable, or there's a lot of pain or suffering in our lives, or there's something that we're just beginning to understand or experience. It's kind of your little aha, and you go, oh, okay, I'm beginning to see the contrast between the heaviness and the discomfort of life and the fact that no, things could be a little bit better, and I want to explore more that way. But there's always a desire for more freedom in our lives. And if we're always in this reactive mode, and we are, I would say, reacting based on our past programming, is that there's not a lot of freedom in that, is there? We get stuck in all of these cycles. And I don't have time today in this intro, but perhaps one day soon, I can pop back on, or I definitely teach through my space as well, is that getting stuck in a lot of these old thoughts and habits and behaviors, that really is the cycle of addiction. And the way for us to break addiction or dependency, and we all have some either addiction or dependency in our lives and in our programming, is that we have to actually rise above that from the mindful place and realize, why is it that I am engaging in this behavior? Or why do I consistently have this belief? And chances are, again, 99.9% of the times, you're going to realize that you are engaging in that behavior to meet one of those 5 fundamental needs. Okay, so even without me getting into it, chances are you're going to be able to start to bring more awareness to that. Okay, so what if the body goes to freeze as a response and the pathway of flow stops? We dissociate and we get cut off from intuition and mindful awareness, and it spirals into a mental health crisis. I'm so glad that you asked that question, because we always talk about fight or flight. And some of us may have heard also that there's kind of that middle path of freeze, where we become so frozen in the response that we actually can't make a decision, or we can't make a choice to get ourselves out of that. And just as anonymous, I'm not sure what your name is, but thank you so much for asking that question. Because we can get frozen still in the reaction for days, for weeks, for months, or even years, and never make a choice to get out of it. And yet the reaction is still going on, right? So we constantly feel afraid, and it begins to deteriorate our entire state of physical and mental health. So I'm just going to talk really quickly about what we can do to move that. And then I want to talk on a much more broad scale about how we can prevent that. So in terms of, I would say prescriptively, if you're finding yourself or somebody that you know who's really been stuck in freeze for a long time, and maybe we can see evidence of this in kind of their outward lying life, where they've been stuck in a really unhealthy, potentially abusive relationship. Maybe you've been stuck in a very unhealthy job that almost feels mentally abusive as well, where there's just a lot of very, very negative behavior and things that are happening. Okay, we get stuck in these cycles, just these perpetuating cycles of lack of confidence and self-hate and all of this inner talk. While we are stuck in freeze, as I had mentioned, the reaction is still going off because the brain is constantly screaming that this is a threat, everything is a threat. And ultimately, we hold that energy in our bodies. And it almost becomes like this sense of armor for us, right? We say, well, I want to make a different choice, but I can't, right? I want to be more mindful, and I want to feel more calm, and I want to listen to this meditation that people send me, and I want to take those 10 deep breaths that, my teacher's telling me to do. But right now, everything in my body is going off. The best thing that you can start to do is you can start to move the energy. And I don't just mean like, oh, I'm going to sit here and, start to, do some, I don't know, moving my arms or go through a gentle yoga practice. Is that we have to move the energy at the same level that we are holding it. Okay. Moving the energy at the same level that we are holding it. And if you have a pen and paper, write that down. You knew how to do this when you were a child. Again, the fight or flight response is a mechanism in our body that not only helps us to get through, but then there's also a lot of cleanup that it does at the end of it. So to help us to get through, think about this as a child. Okay, so if you have children like me, it's easy for me to kind of think about this, or I think about myself as a kid. But you see a child at the grocery store, and the child really wants this chocolate bar. Mom, can I have this chocolate bar? And mom says, no, we're going home and we're going to eat dinner. Mom, buy me this chocolate bar. No, I said, no, you can't have that. I want this chocolate bar. And you say, no, you cannot have this chocolate bar. Well, everything within that child starts to get so angry because it's not getting what it wants to have. And whether the child is appeased by that chocolate bar, which is probably not the best thing because it creates one of those cycles that I was talking about, of dependency. But for the sake of answering this question, we're going to say that you don't give it to that child. The child is holding all of that energy of anger and frustration and aggression, and my need isn't being met right now. So it's holding that energy. But that child hasn't been taught by society that it's not okay, or it's not socially acceptable to express and to discharge that energy at the same level that it's holding it. So what does the child do? It starts to have a temper tantrum in the middle of the grocery store, right? It starts to move its arms around, starts to stomp and kick its feet. Maybe it lays down on the ground and it moves all of that energy. Why? Because we were never designed to hold on to it. When the need isn't being met, whether we find a way to meet it or not, we still have to move the energy. Because if you don't move the energy, it builds and it builds and it builds. And whether you're going into fight or flight 15 to 20 times a day or 40 to 50 times a day, if you're not discharging the energy that is being mobilized to help you to navigate the response is it starts to become so stuck within our bodies that is so much of what keeps us frozen and paralyzed in the reaction, where we actually can't step or move forward. Why? Because now the entire body and the entire mind are in this relationship and this partnership together. They're on the front lines of that battlefield saying that everything coming in now is a threat. Okay. So one of the best things that you can start to do is you can start to move the energy. And when I say at the same level that you're holding it, if you have a child who's having a temper tantrum, telling them to go for a timeout in the corner and to sit down and to be really quiet is likely not going to do the job. Is that first, maybe letting them go outside, go into their room, punch that pillow, do whatever they need to do to get rid of that first, and then they can sit and be calm, right? If you are in your car and you are so frustrated because you're navigating traffic to get somewhere and you can feel yourself getting angry, there are so many things that we can do. We can start to yell at the top of our lungs. We can sing at the top of our lungs. It doesn't always mean that if you're holding the energy of anger that you have to be angry. Okay, but just think about how hot and intense and fast that might be. So now I need to move my body in a hot and intense and fast way until I feel that I have burned all of that fuel off, right? So you can have a dance party, you can go for a walk. Sometimes for me, I like to just create a safe space. One of my friends or even my husband, and him and I have this new thing right now where when I come to him or he comes to me, with something, and let's say I'm coming to him and I just need his support, and I'll say, okay, I need you right now, and he'll say boyfriend, girlfriend, meaning, do you need me to be your boyfriend right now and give you advice how to get through this, or do you need me to be your girlfriend right now and be that sounding board for you to get out what you need to get out with no judgment? And I'll say girlfriend, and he'll say, okay, go, and I'll just go, and I'll let out everything that I need to say so that I'm not holding on to it. And then at the end, I can start to feel more mindful, right? So letting that lid off of the pot on the stove. And if you feel, my goodness, that maybe you're not in an acute stress situation, but you feel that now the stress that you're carrying is chronic, you have been in this freeze mode for a really long time, then I'm just going to invite you to start to find ways to move the body and just think about it like you're unwinding, right? Think about it like you're unwinding, because muscle has memory, organs have memory, tissue has memory. Think about all of the waters within your body. Everything has memory. And we carry these memories around with us everywhere. And we become these sensitive little touch pads that people have no idea about what it is that we're carrying. And they come up and they say one thing and they touch us. And it puts us into this sense of freeze. And then we hold this energy and we take it home with us, or we take it to work with us. Start to move the energy, right? So you can do it in a moment where you start to feel triggered, or you can begin to create a daily habit and a daily practice of that. And I promise you, it's going to help to diminish a lot of, I would say, just a lot of the stress and that kind of that frazzled fray ends that we're holding on to. Okay, so I hope that was helpful for you. Okay, beautiful. Yes, a recording will be available. Absolutely, Jill. Now, the other thing that is really important that I want to share with you, and then I'm going to actually take all of you through a little meditation here today as well, because I want you to have the experience of something that is really simple and easily accessible, and it's going to start to make a difference in your life. The moment that you practice it, it's going to start today, and here's how it's going to help you. So one of the reasons that so many of us are so quick to react to stress now, it's not because we're getting older and with age comes impatience, right? And lack of tolerance. It's because we have had far more experiences of this stress response and we continue to hold on to it. And I don't know if you're like me, I was told many times by teachers and parents that, shh, like not right now, just sit down. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to be sad. In fact, you're not even allowed to be jumping up and down and happy and excited right now. Just sit down and be quiet. Right? So we've learned this behavior of holding on to it. And so if you think about, there was a point of time in all of our lives where the level of stress that we had was relatively low. Okay. So I don't know what this was for you. It's all going to be relative. If you've experienced trauma as a child, as I did, it wasn't necessarily when I was a child, it was when the trauma was kind of over and I started to regain some control in my life, is that I went through this beautiful period, maybe just for a few years, where I felt, I would say, like much more at peace. I woke up in peace. My day felt a little bit easier. And then I got married and immediately had a child. And so what I began to notice is that instead of going into fight or flight 1 or 2 times a day, I was going into fight or flight 15 to 20 times a day. And when we are in a period of time that is relatively low stress, our resting heart rate, okay, we're going to say, just for the sake of numbers here, a really happy, healthy resting heart rate might be somewhere around 55 beats per minute. Okay. I'm just going to use a couple of your little functions in your body here as a marker. So let's say that your resting heart rate's 55 beats per minute. Maybe it is right now. And your blood pressure, nice, healthy, low blood pressure, 120 over 80. Okay. So wake up in the morning, 55 beats per minute, 120 over 80. So we wake up slowly and gently. We have our coffee, our breakfast, no big deal. But we go throughout the course of the day, and I'm going to use the traffic example again. You have a meeting and you get this detour, and Google Maps says it's going to take you an extra 10 minutes to get there. This is a first time meeting and you want to make sure that you honor your commitment to this person. Well, you start to notice yourself going into the stress response. So instead of 55 beats per minute with the heart rate, maybe now it's working at 120 or 130 beats per minute, because you can feel it doing this, right? Which then means that the blood pressure has to elevate to make sure that we don't have a heart attack or a stroke, right? That we can actually circulate the blood throughout the brain and the body. So now the blood pressure goes, instead of from 120 over 80, blood pressure goes 140 over 90. The digestion within your belly, right? And this is really important, because one of the best ways to recognize how am I doing stress right now is to notice what's happening with your digestion. Because back in the old days, when human beings were traipsing around the earth, if we faced with a threat, we didn't need to be using all of the energy to digest our last meal, right? We needed all of the energy that we could to be, down in the legs, so that we had strength and we had endurance, and we needed it up in our fists. So naturally what happens is, if you've just recently put a meal into your belly and you go into the stress response, the first thing that your body wants to do is it wants to get rid of it, which is why we tend to feel very nauseous all of a sudden. It's like, oh God, I feel like I'm going to be sick, right? So-and-so wants me to go up on the stage right now and to go and introduce them, and public speaking makes me feel really, really sick, right? So we either want to get rid of, we want to evacuate it this way, or sometimes we want to evacuate it the other way, where we make jokes saying that, I was so scared that I nearly pooped my pants. It's a real thing, especially when you look at kids, and we can start to dive a little bit deeper into, and I had this with one of my sons, who was 10 or he was in 5th grade, 10 or 11, who was losing his bowels. And I'm like, what is going on with you? Only to realize that he was getting bullied at school. It had nothing to do, I thought, for a long time. Well, are you so busy on the playground at lunch that you can't go to the bathroom? No, it's because he was getting bullied on the playground too. Okay, so if you've recently ingested that meal, the first thing that the body tries to do, because it knows what it's doing, is it wants to get rid of it. If the meal is far enough down into your digestive tract now, is think about your digestion like a big machine, as it literally shuts the machine off. So we feel this big lump in the bottom of our guts. And sometimes we all know it's like, oh, such awful news, and it's so heavy what's happening. I just feel like this big lump in the bottom of my stomach. Okay, so all of these things are happening for you in this stress response, and it's there to help us to get through that. But if we are going into fight or flight 15 to 20 times a day, it means that your resting heart rate is going from 55 beats per minute to 120, 130, 140, 150 beats per minute. And your blood pressure is going from 120 over 80, and it's jumping up by 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. If it's doing this 15 to 20 times a day, the body does not want to waste energy the same way that it does not want to keep digesting your meals or your experiences and your emotions while you need that energy for fight or flight. So the body and the brain pride themselves on efficiency. And what studies have shown that in just 3 weeks of being in this kind of constant state of stress is that all of those vital functions within your body, they recalibrate and they readjust themselves. So if you were to come to me today, and if I was to take your heart rate and your blood pressure And I could actually do a VO2 rate. I could see like how much oxygen are you using? Because remember what happens to our breath in fight or flight. The breath becomes very shallow, right? Becomes very, very shallow, meaning that we're not getting enough oxygen in. We're certainly not getting enough of that carbon dioxide out, which then becomes very acidic in the body, not so good. So I can test all of your baseline level of functioning, your digestive rate, your metabolic rate. I can do that. If you are consistently in a state of stress, in 3 weeks, the body says, listen, it takes a lot of energy for me to take you from 55 beats per minute to 130 beats per minute, only to have to recover again and take you back up there again in another hour and recover and take you back up there again in another hour after that. So in 3 weeks, it says, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do you a favor. Instead of recovering from 130 beats per minute all the way back down to 55, because I know you're going to need me, I'm going to only recover to 65. Okay, just so that I'm ready and I can get you there faster. And then in 3 more weeks after that, it says, oh, okay, you still need me and you still need me a lot. So instead of recovering to 65, I'm going to recover you to 75. Okay, so we're slowly stepping all of those rates up to the point where now we wake up in the morning and our resting heart rate is 85 or 90 beats per minute. Our blood pressure is now at the point where a doctor's saying, hey, we need to maybe look at putting you on high blood pressure medication because your blood pressure, even when you're at rest, is too high, right? You're saying, oh God, my digestion, I just feel like, I don't know what it is. I now have all of these allergies or these intolerances, or I just feel like I can't move my bowels, or they've been too loose for like a year now. There's something that's happening. Yeah, of course there's something that's happening. We've now worked ourselves into stage 1 of chronic stress, stage 2 of chronic stress, stage 3 of chronic stress. Why? Because we are consistently having our needs not being met, and we're allowing ourselves to react to it again and again and again, and we're not discharging the energy. We're not using that reaction. We're staying stuck in it. We're creating other habits and behaviors to try to avoid it as best we can, okay, or to offset it without moving all of this energy. And so the incredible thing though, and usually when I teach this, a lot of people are like, oh God, that makes so much sense. And that's why I have a hard time falling asleep at night, because the moment that the world gets quiet, I can hear my heart beating in my chest, or my legs feel restless, right? Or I'm bloated, or I have a stomach ache. It's because your body is, all of its functions are so high. Your body isn't at rest. So how are you supposed to dip into some of those deeper sleep states that are necessary for us to be able to restore the body, but also to digest a lot of the thoughts and the emotions that we're carrying? So we need to be able to dip that down. That's where meditation is going to come in here in just a couple more minutes. But the incredible thing that I really want to share with you, which is why I'm such a huge driver of these meditation and mindfulness practices, is that many of us that are experiencing anywhere from chronic 1 stress to a chronic 3 or chronic 4 stress, which is full burnout, is that it's reversible. Is that just as we have unconsciously worked ourselves into, I'm going to say, these states of always being ready for stress, we've done that, I'm going to say unconsciously, because I don't think anybody says, wow, I can't wait to be stressed out all the time. Just as that has happened unconsciously, we can consciously now start to rework or lower those functions back down so that we are in what is now called a state of restful awareness. Because where we are in a state of chronic stress is active alertness. Active alertness. So think about a dog who has been, I'm going to say, abused or trained to always be on guard. Is that dog it's never really at rest, right? A guard dog, guarding a lumber yard, it's never trained to really be at rest. It always has to be listening to every sound. And it can't take a lot of time to, kind of, I wonder if that's no, it has to be ready to always act. And that's really what we've done for our brains, many of us, and it's what we've done to our bodies. But now we can start to reverse that. And so how do we do that? We actually just follow the same path back. The same way that we train ourselves to be actively alert by constantly immersing ourselves in situations that require us to always react and to be on, is that we can now consistently immerse ourselves into different experiences that help to nurture I say restful awareness, meaning that the body can be at rest, the mind can be at rest, but I can still be aware of everything that's happening. I'm not taking myself out of the world entirely, but I'm stepping back, or maybe I'm getting off of the roller coaster, so to speak, and I'm able to just watch as everything is moving and going on. That really, at the end of the day, is what the practice of meditation does for us. So that meditation allows us to step out, to get outside, to witness our bodies. Okay, this is happening in my body. To witness our mind, to watch our thoughts. And an incredible thing happens when we start to watch our bodies and we watch our thoughts. We begin to realize that I'm not my body. How do I know that I'm not my body? Because I can look at it, right? I'm not my hand. I have a hand. Okay, I'm not my hand. I have my hand, because there's separation. I can see that it is outside of the one who is seeing it or observing it. And the same thing goes for my thoughts, and my thoughts that I think consistently, which create my beliefs. If I can watch my thoughts, if I can watch the thought that I have about myself when I look in the mirror, am I that thought? Or am I the one who's observing it's not interesting that I have that thought? Right? So maybe this is, as one of my teachers used to say, maybe this is the first thought that you've ever thought about that thought. But it's a really important place for us to be when we can step back and say, well, then if I'm not my body and I'm not my mind, the one having the thoughts, then who am I? Then who am I? And when we start to look at ourselves holistically as that kind of that trifecta of body, mind, and spirit, or body, mind, and soul, whatever word you want to use for soul or spirit, some people say witness or observer. I don't really care what you call it, but it's recognizing that there is a place, there is a seat within myself that is unchanging. It's ever present, and it's always witnessing and observing. So even though my body is always changing, my mind is always changing, the one who is observing the body and the mind is never changing, right? In fact, the more that I begin to kind of sit back and hear, is I realize that no, this presence of self or of observer, it actually has stayed quite consistent for the majority of my life, or as far back as I can remember anyway, is that she or he, or, this presence is quiet and it's calm. It's the place where I can be. I don't need to do, I don't need to worry. It's the space in between my thoughts. It's where I rest comfortably at the end of my exhale. And this is always present for us. So this is really where, and thank you for beginning to entertain this as a possibility for you, because I think that the true gift of meditation and mindful living is our ability to step outside of body and mind. Because when we ask ourselves that question amidst a stressful situation, is this in fact a threat to my survival? Who's asking that? It's not the critical mind or the ego, whatever word you want to use, the one who's programmed to think it's a threat. That's not the one asking the question. It's the one who's observing that reaction that's coming from that space, right? So here, that mindful witness, here is where we're also going to be leaning back into when we go into meditation. Okay, so as we engage in a practice, whether it's 5 minutes, okay, or 20 minutes, and I say 5 to 20 because all of the research that's been done for many, many, many years says that it takes 5 minutes for us to deactivate, we say the sympathetic nervous system, which is where that stress response comes from, and to shift into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the division within ourselves that is responsible for rest and digest. Okay, so it takes 5 minutes for the mind to recalibrate and for the body to recalibrate so we can start to feel the effects of rest and relaxation. Okay, so if you're going to sit for 5 minutes and then upwards to 20 minutes, so it's funny, sometimes people think if I meditate, I have to meditate for an hour or 2 hours. All of the research that's been done that says for optimal benefit for your physical body, for your mind, is 20 minutes. Okay, so you get to choose, how long do I really want to sit here for? But when we sit in that practice and we step outside of everything that is happening and we can question, naturally those reactions begin to settle. When I start to say, do I need to feel stressed about this? Is this really a threat to my survival or not? When I no longer feel threatened, then we begin to deactivate the fight or flight response, meaning that heart rate that is maybe going 130 beats per minute slowly starts to come down again. Okay, the blood pressure slowly starts to come down again. The digestion that doesn't feel threatened, like it needs to get ready for it turns back on again. And a lot of people say to me all the time when they meditate, they're like, oh God, I have all this saliva in my mouth, or my stomach starts to gurgle and I get hungry. Why do I get so hungry when I meditate? I'm not doing anything. It's because your body is preparing itself to digest again your food and also everything that's happening emotionally for you in your life as well. So when we do this consistently, and by consistently, I mean every day, okay, 5 minutes a day, 7 minutes a day, within 3 weeks, what starts to happen is the same thing that happened before when you were in constant state of stress and stressful situations, is the mind and body have a conversation and they say, hey, she's going to do this again tomorrow. He's going to do this again tonight. There's no point, from a resting heart rate perspective, of me, because when you're in meditation, okay, let's say you dipped in and your resting heart rate's 85 beats per minute now because you're in stage 2 chronic stress or stage 3. When you go into that meditation, we can actually dip below that. Maybe you come all the way back down to 60 in the practice, okay? So when you're doing this for 3 weeks, there's no point in coming to 85. Now we're working down here instead of up and down here, we're working down here. There's no point in coming all the way back up to 85. Maybe instead of from 60, you're going to do this again tomorrow. Okay, maybe I'll just go to 70. Oh, and then do this for 3 more weeks, go back down to 60, or maybe I can just come to 65. Oh, for a few more weeks, maybe I can get back down to 60. Right? So maybe within a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, actually doesn't take very long, you guys, consistent practice, everything again begins to recalibrate itself. That baseline readout, if you come back to me and say, hey, Mandy, can you take my heart rate, my blood pressure, my VO2 rate, my metabolic rate, my digestion, and I was noticing you up here in chronic stress, but you have been meditating or practicing every day, and you go, oh, look at you. Things are back down here again. We don't do that for the 5 minutes or the 10 minutes that we're sitting in meditation. We do that for the other 24 hours-ish or so, 23 and a half hours, 23 and 3/4 hours of the day, because I show up differently in the world when my resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute versus 90. I show up differently in the world when my rate of digestion and my ability to move my food and my experiences is much more efficient and effective. I show up differently in the world. I'm more clear-headed when my dog isn't barking in the back of my brain, which, by the way, we can prove through brain imaging and scanning now. As of about 8 years ago, they did a huge study on this, is the more threat that we are experiencing, the more that guard dog is barking, the bigger that it gets. Your amygdala physically gets bigger in size in the back of your brain. And then the front of the brain, which is responsible for all of your higher level thinking, your intelligence, your long-term memory, your emotional impulse control, this prefrontal cortex here, is if we're under a lot of stress, the layer that covers it actually begins to get thinner, right? I think there's less oxygen, less life force going there. So even our ability to think clearly, and hopefully this also answers the question from earlier, when I'm frozen in this response and I don't know what is a good decision to make, or I can't make a good decision, is that being in a constant state of stress, and we're seeing more and more children like this now from a younger age due to, again, so much access to the world around them and video games and just everything that's happening, is that the chemistry within their brain, or the biology within their brain, it forms itself such that it is always like that poor scared dog in the corner, that any hand that reaches in to help is perceived as a hand that is reaching into harm, and it's going to bite you. So think about that huge guard dog back here that begins to bark at everything. And then we have very limited access to that prefrontal cortex that allows us to make new decisions, right? To access higher creativity, to be more critical thinkers, to be more intelligent thinkers, to control our emotions. When you sit down in meditation, though, and we get control of that guard dog, we say, it's okay right now. I appreciate it, but I don't need you out guarding me right now. This is a safe space. Is that the guard dog actually begins to shrink. The amygdala starts to shrink. It kind of goes on this beautiful standby. And then we have all of this blood flow, all of this energy flow up towards the front of the brain. And that layer again that is made of gray matter, it begins to get thicker. So we start to pad and to form this area. And it actually helps us with long-term memory, and it helps us with creative thinking, all of these great things. So every practice that you have and getting back into the world, every thought that you have, every time you're able to catch yourself and to create a new habit and new behavior, it is literally changing the shape and the form of your brain, and is helping you to evolve into a much higher and more conscious place of being. Okay, so we're helping the body, we're helping the brain, and then ultimately at the end, sorry, I'm just making sure there's no questions as we go here. At the end of the day, we start to do almost this beautiful, I'm kind of doing this back and forth thing here right now, but it looks more like a spiral. You might be stepping back into a stressful event or workplace. You might have to go and visit your family again. Typical situations that would stress you out. The only difference now is that you're seeing it from a higher perspective, right? We're seeing it from a higher perspective. We're able to get out of the reaction. We can see where maybe we would have reacted in the past, or there's, instead of 100% reaction before, maybe now there's a 30% reaction or a 20% reaction, and we don't feel as impacted by that. Okay, there's a question. Can anyone meditate when their thoughts are racing so fast and furious that they are convincing, and we begin to believe that they are true, and it does not feel like there's a capacity to witness, to question in the way that you're speaking about from a mindfulness perspective? It says that those states do not feel safe at all or logical. Someone may not even feel that meditation is possible. It's more crazy making than helpful. Okay, yes, thank you for sharing that. It can be very, very difficult when you have experienced a lot of trauma that have fed stories that no matter what, we're not safe, and being with ourselves is not safe. And I'll just share a personal little story here very quickly, is that I've worked quite intimately over the last 10 years. I have started an organization in India and Nepal working in anti-trafficking shelters. And so these are little girls that have been sold into the sex trafficking trade. I've done brothel raids. I've worked in safe homes with these kids. And oftentimes for the first year to 5 years, these kids or these young women do not feel safe enough to even close their eyes to entertain finding a sense of peace and stillness within themselves. There's no way. And so we have to find a way to meet them where they're at, to meet their brain where it's at, and step by step to slowly start to guide it down. One practice that I have found very, very helpful, and if you have a pen and paper, I'm going to invite you to write this down, comes from a beautiful psychologist by the name of Dr. Richard Miller. And Richard Miller is a psychologist in the US that works now almost exclusively with ex-military vets and those with post-traumatic stress. And his practice it's called iRest. So almost like an iPhone or an iPad, iRest. And it's a yoga nidra based practice. Okay, it's a yoga nidra based practice. And it's not yoga, you're not moving your body around in that way, but really yoga nidra translates to yogic sleep. So it's a guided practice. You're not leaving somebody alone with their own thoughts. Is that they are being forced to listen to what somebody else is sharing with them or guiding with them. And it's very simple. We do body scan, we do breath. So where there's no outward visualization, nothing outside of ourselves that could potentially trigger. It's not to say that there won't be triggers that are released. And I'm going to share something about that in a minute. But it's a guided, there's a specific speed to it. Right? There's not a lot of gaps or spaces for the mind to wander. It just keeps bringing the practitioner or the participant back to the moment, The mind wants to wander, we bring it back. Okay, so if that is something for you or for somebody that you know or somebody that you're working with, that is really, I have experienced great success with that with a lot of my girls in India and Nepal, but also a lot of people. Specifically, I work with a lot of first responders here as well who struggle with sleep and have to take a lot of sleep medication, or they struggle then with alcohol or drug addiction due to needing to shut off that brain. But the other piece that I want to share with you, and this was also something that in one of the lectures that I had attended of Dr. Richard Miller's, is that a lot of our traditional psychology and talk therapy, though can be extremely helpful, okay, and I work intimately with a lot of different therapists personally, but also professionally too, is that it, with respect to meditation and mindfulness, is that there's a very difficult bridge, because when you have the safety of somebody who's sitting across from you, who's allowing you to recapitulate a lot of these experiences or these behaviors that have come up from that, is that they can consistently pull you back in and say, you're safe and you're good. But then when you leave somebody to their own thoughts and to their own devices, this is where we can get into trouble. And what Dr. Miller had said is that when we are taking the approach of being in the mind, in the thought, or in the experience, thinking that we are the mind, we are the thought, and we are the experience, is that this can perpetuate all of the symptoms of trauma. When we start to step ourselves back slowly and realize that even though this happened to me, or with me, or through me, or for me, is that I actually realized that that was something that had happened. There's thoughts, feelings, emotions related to that, but that's not who I am. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of taking a long time to explain that, but it's back to that body, mind, and that spirit. And that if we're looking to be able to transcend those unhealthy and those really uncomfortable and painful thoughts and beliefs, is that we have to find the seed of transcendence. What is the seed of transcendence? Where do we actually get safe and secure? Is it's in that seat of self, right? And you may even have to go all the way back to being a child, as young as you can remember, pre the world feeling maybe really, really crazy for you, is that we have to go back there, right? And we have to find that sense of self. We all have that sense of self. Many of us have lost it, right? We have lost it in, roles and responsibilities that we've taken on, and how we're projected within all of that. Things that have happened, choices that we have made that we take responsibility for. And the way out of that is to slowly start to come back into self. And so, to answer your question, and thank you for asking that question, because it's a really, really important one to do or to know, is that we have to first establish the true sense of safety. We have to find that foundation. We can start it with eyes open, right? This is not the meditation that I'm going to take you through right now, but I'm just going to share this with you quickly, is to do something. And even right now I have my glass of kombucha here. So I may even put my glass of kombucha in front of me, or a candle, or even a chair, or just something that feels, a plant, a tree, something that feels neutral. Okay. And it's just to sit and to notice that thing that is in front of you right now, to notice the who is it that is noticing. Am I that glass, right? Am I what is inside of it? Am I that tree? Or am I the one who's noticing and witnessing that? And then you'll start to recognize that you actually have thoughts about it. Oh, I don't like that. Or, oh, I do like that, right? And then start to notice your thoughts. Okay, well, if I'm witnessing that I have thoughts and judgments and preferences about what I'm seeing, am I the judgment or the preference, or am I the one who's noticing that I have the judgment or the preference of that, right? So there's a lot of work sometimes that needs to be done on all of this, and I'm welcome to help any of you, please. At the end of this, I'll make sure that I share my contact info with you, or if for some reason I can't support, I'll definitely be able to point you in the right direction to do that. But the amount of success that I have been able to see, and I know that Dr. Richard Miller speaks about a lot, in allowing the practitioner to step outside and to find safe ground, to then start to observe, that has been extremely healing. Okay. The meditation that I am going to take you through is not going to be long. I'm just going to keep my time here, about 10 minutes or so. And before we get into it, I'm just going to give you maybe a minute or so to find a space for yourself that feels comfortable. At the end of the meditation, I'm just going to go through some of the practicals. Okay. A lot of people then ask questions like, what is a good time of day to meditate? Where's a good place? Should I meditate? Shouldn't I meditate? How long should I be meditating for? And then I'll also open it up to a few questions as well, if you would like to ask some questions, because I think sometimes we make this a lot harder than it needs to be, right? Because it doesn't need to be hard, but it does take practice. It does take practice. It's called a practice for a reason. We don't do it once and nail it and we're good for the rest of our lives. Know that every experience that you have and every thought that you have is constantly changing the shape and the form of your brain and of your body. And sometimes it's what we like. We like what's happening, and sometimes we don't like what's happening. But it's always moving and it's always changing. Okay, so we can work with that. And to be able to really unwind a lot of what, we have been programmed and reacting from, is it does take a little bit of patience to be able to do that. Okay, so I invite you to be patient with yourself through this process, to know that there's going to be days where you feel so beautiful and so at home with yourself, and then there's going to be other days where you set your little timer for 5 minutes and your mind thinks a million thoughts within that period of time, and that's okay. What I tell people is don't move still. I mean, you can move, but don't get up. If you set that for 5 minutes, and at least we're participating in the practice, is that we're still getting the benefits of the practice, even if it just means that we're sitting a little more still than we normally would, right? So even if you have a bad day and you don't want to go to the gym and work out, but you go in and you lift a weight 3 times or 5 times, you're still going to get some benefits of that. Okay. So as you start to find that comfortable position for your body, the last thing that I'll say with respect to that last comment about what if you have a million thoughts? Thoughts are normal. Okay, thoughts are absolutely normal. We all have thoughts. Meditation is not about stopping your thoughts. It's about watching your thoughts. Okay. A lot of people think meditation is about learning how to stop my thoughts. And if you try to stop your thoughts, that whole saying, what you resist persists, you actually notice that you have more thoughts. And so the state of mindfulness is different from the state of meditation, because the state of meditation is what will just naturally happen when you slip outside of thoughts. You don't have to try for that to happen. It's just going to happen. And it might be a split second kind of here or there. Okay. But slipping out of those thoughts where we kind of say, like, we zone out, I don't know where I went for a second and I come back, is that as we come back, we come into a state of mindfulness. Mindfulness means that we're having thoughts, but now we're consciously choosing one thought. We're choosing one thought. So when we're not consciously choosing our thoughts, we're reacting to everything that's happening. Research would tell us that we have between 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Absolutely. Yes, and I will address that for sure. 50 to 80,000 thoughts a day. That's how many thoughts the average human being is having. That's a lot of thoughts, okay? And those are just thoughts that are coming in through the 5 senses all around us all the time. You have the option and the choice to choose what your next thought is going to be. That's just part of being human. You get to choose what your next thought is going to be. So if you don't like that thought, you can choose another one. You don't like that next thought, you can choose another one. And then also, to clarify here, the question is to clarify suicidal self-harm thoughts. Okay, I mean, there's a much bigger picture to all of that, as I'm sure you're well aware, is to looking into the depths, through therapy or psychotherapy, or any other, healing therapies that you're using, as to, what are some of the deeper threads or the roots of all of that. But on a moment by moment basis, how can I shift or alter my thoughts, is that we have to choose what is the thought that I'm going to focus on. We can do this in our waking state all the time, but a beautiful place to practice that is in our meditation. Okay, so the thought that we are going to choose is called a mantra. It's called a mantra. We're all familiar with the word mantra, M-A-N-T-R-A. It comes from 2 words, okay, in Latin. Man, M-A-N, is the root of the Latin word manos. Manos means mind. And we know the mind is everywhere within our bodies, okay? Meaning that we're bringing information in through everywhere within our bodies. Tra is the suffix of the word instrument. So the word mantra literally translates to instrument of the mind, or instrument for the mind. If we do not have an instrument, something to play or something to focus on, the mind is going to go everywhere. That I can promise you, and that you already know. So with respect to mantras, there are 2 different types of mantras. We have a meaningful mantra, okay, which is something that looks a little bit more like an affirmation. Okay, so if, for example, you are not feeling well, you're feeling very unhealthy, or you're feeling sick, we choose then a meaningful mantra that aligns to how I want to feel or what I want to focus on. If I want to focus on my health, my mantra might be, I am becoming healthier every day. right? Or my body is becoming stronger every moment. It should be something simple and it's very clear. And here's a little side bit of wisdom. I was going to say trick side bit of wisdom. It needs to be something that you can believe in. And it has to be something that you can believe in, because we also have something called sponsoring thoughts. Okay, because if I'm struggling, let's say with my finances right now, and the economy's tanked and I don't have a job, and I'm worried about how I'm going to make my next mortgage payment, and I'm going, oh God, all of my thoughts are I'm broke and I'm going to go into more debt and I'm going to, okay, let me create a new thought to focus on. Every time my mind starts to run down that track, what's the new thought? But if I start to create the thought of the affirmation that, I am abundant and I am rich, my sponsoring thought is going to say, no, you're not. No, you're not. I know that that's not true. And the body is like, well, what am I listening to? It's usually going to listen to the sponsoring thought. So we have to choose a thought that we can believe. The thought that I can believe is that I am on the path to becoming abundant, or I am making all of the right choices to be financially safe. I am aligning myself with financial security, right? I am worthy and deserving of financial safety. So we must choose an affirmation. And so this means that when we're in our daily waking state, as my thoughts start to run down the wrong track, remember my body is responding to that and I start to believe it on all levels, is that I now know that I have a mantra that I can repeat as many times as I need until I start to believe that my body starts to realign itself and mobilize itself to move down that path. And it will happen because a lot of those other very negative thoughts and self-harming thoughts that you have, you weren't born with those. Those thoughts came from a single thought that was likely connected to an experience or something that had happened to you, with you, through you. And then you've created that thought and you've thought that thought so many times that it becomes this belief or this soundtrack that's playing. We can change that, okay? So we can change that in the waking state, but it really helps when we can change that in the meditative state. So when we come into the meditative state, we can still use affirmations, the meaningful mantras, or we can also use what's known as a meaningless mantra. And the meaningless mantra is something that is just more vibrational, like following your breath. The breath doesn't have a meaning. Okay, focusing on your left big toe doesn't have a meaning. Listening to the sound of the air conditioner or a bubbling fountain doesn't have a meaning. Silently chanting Om, okay, doesn't have a meaning. And sometimes, when we allow ourselves to feel relaxed or rested enough, it's really helpful. That would be that next level or that next step to bring in a meaningless mantra, because then that allows us to just dip into those deeper states of meditation where I don't have to be thinking at all. Even if the thoughts are, more positive and uplifting or good, sometimes I want to get to the point where I'm not thinking at all. Why? Because then my body really gets to relax. It doesn't need to react whatsoever. Okay. So for the sake of today's meditation or practice, I think based on a couple of these questions coming in, I'm just going to show you how to do both. So you can either, if you need to keep your eyes open because that feels safer for you, you're absolutely welcome to do that. I'm just going to encourage you to find one thing to focus on. Anything, your focal point, we call it a drishti. Okay, it can be something down on the floor, it can be something in front of you. If you're comfortable to close your eyes, I'll be inviting you to close your eyes. I'm going to take you through the body just with a nice gentle body scan. And then we're going to bring the attention towards the breath and the heart. And there, we're going to create an affirmation, so your meaningful mantra. And so you may notice, because we're going to just end up spending 1 to 2 minutes together in silence, you may notice that my mind is so active right now that I need to use this as my mantra because it just feels more powerful. But I'm also going to give you the sound of your heart. Center, your heart chakra has a vibration, just like the vibration on a piano or on a string of a guitar. I'm going to give you that sound, and then you can choose to even just chant that sound again and again. And I'll watch the time for those couple of minutes, and then I'll bring you back again nice and slowly. Okay? So there's nothing that you need to do here right now. Please just check around, make sure that you're safe in your environment, that you're as rested as you are. Know that there's going to be distractions. There's going to be things happening on my end. There's going to be things happening on your end. And that's totally okay. Why? Because as the mind starts to wander, we pull it back to the affirmation, or we pull it back to the mantra. Okay. And every time you pull it back, it's like doing a rep in the gym. And the more times that we pull it back, so sometimes having more thoughts is a good thing. The more times we pull it back, the stronger that muscle becomes, the muscle of focus, of concentration, okay? Us being here in this moment right now. So if you're ready, let's find that position in the body. Legs can be crossed, legs can be extended. You can lie down, whatever feels best for you here. Eyes can be open, and if they're open, let's find that space that we're going to start to stare at right now. If not, and eyes are going to be closed, let's slowly begin to close those eyes. Take a nice long deep breath in through the nose. And as you exhale, drop the jaw and let's let it out with a big sigh. Inhale, big breath in through the nose. Exhale out through the mouth, great big sigh. And one more time, big inhale through the nose. And exhale all the way out. And then releasing any need to control or to manipulate the breath, and just allow the breath to be natural now. Allow the breath to come in wherever it wants to come in, maybe through the nose, maybe through the mouth. Notice where the breath goes in your body. And then lastly, notice where the breath leaves your body. And then as you take that next breath in, take the breath in and follow that breath all the way down towards the toes. And into the feet and into the ankles. And just notice how your toes and your feet and your ankles feel right now. And if you need to make any shifts or any adjustments to make them feel a little bit more comfortable, then this is a really great time and a great space to do that. Shift or move them around. And then when they feel nice and settled, let's slowly start to take that breath into the calves and into the shins, into the knees. Again, if you need to make any shifts or adjustments, let's do that now. Bringing the breath up slowly through the tops of your legs, those large muscle groups that often hold so much of that tension. This is full permission for the inhale to begin to fill that space, and for the exhale to allow any of the resistance that we're willing to put down or to let go of to be released. Bringing the breath into your seat, into your glutes, into your hips and the front of your pelvis. And as you exhale, just really sinking down here, and almost as though you can start to feel from the base of your tailbone, like the roots of a tree, digging down and towards the ground. Beginning to feel a little bit more solid here. Noticing how steady and how secure the ground feels beneath you, whether it's beneath your feet or your seat or even the chair that you might be sitting in. And then slowly bringing that inhale into the belly, knowing that there's no need to suck in or to hold in. We can allow that belly to fill fully and completely right here, right now. Unlocking the muscles of the lower back. As you exhale, just let the belly go. Knowing that in this very moment, you are safe to surrender. That your nature is surrender. And your nature is also flow and ease. And the only work that needs to be done in this life is finding all of the places where we hold fear and resistance, and we work with that. And although ease and effortlessness may not feel natural to you, reminding yourself that safety is my nature. Effortlessness and flow is my nature. To bring in and to let go is my nature. And as I am an extension of the nature that surrounds me, I am reminded. And I am reminded through my breath. And so as you take that next inhale, begin to feel the rib cage as it starts to expand, bringing all of that new life force into your body, unlocking some of those areas of tightness and restriction. And then as you exhale, can you begin to see how the primary purpose of the exhale is to cleanse and to sweep away? So to sweep away all that is no longer serving our physical body, but it's also there to begin to sweep away all that is no longer helping to serve our mental and our emotional body. And inhaling into the lungs and knowing that as you inhale to increase space in the lungs, that we also increase space for the heart to open. You can feel the heart that's beating in the chest, and we can allow the breath to penetrate into the depths of the heart, bringing more love and more compassion. And as we exhale slowly, releasing some of the heaviness or the grief of separation that we may be holding on to in the heart center. This is slow work and this is gentle work. And it all begins with kindness to self. So beginning to nourish our entire bodies with that heart as we inhale, breathe into the heart. And from the heart, following the breath down through the arms, into the palms of the hands, and extending out through the tips of the fingers. Allowing those hands to be an extension of our heart center. Knowing that as we increase breath and resonance in the heart, that the love that is shared down into the palms of the hands can be given first and foremost to self. These two hands that have the capacity to harm and to take life out of this world, but they also have the capacity to heal and to bring life into this world. And that choice is always ours. But when you realize that at the depths of your heart and at the depths of the breath and in the stillness, that beneath the resistance and the fear only lives love, we see our potential. So finding that potential within self, nurturing all aspects of our body, from our digestion to our breath to our nervous system, healing all of the spaces and the places within ourselves that we have stood on guard for so long, protecting ourselves and our 5 psychological needs, not to mention all of our physical needs. Knowing that we've done the job that we've done to this point, all for safety and protection. And while it's brought us here, it's time to evolve. It's time to transcend and to see that we don't necessarily need to work so hard anymore. That we can slowly begin to rise and to climb up that mountain to sit in that seat of mindfulness, the seat of the witness, to begin from where you are now, to notice that while you have a body, that you are not your body. To begin to observe whether eyes are open or closed, observe your feet. How have your feet changed from the time that you were a child until now? To observe your belly, your chest, your arms, and even your hands. How have your hands changed from the time that you were a child until this very moment? And then even observing your own face, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your head, your hair. How have all of these features changed over the course of your life? And we observe the body, and then we observe the mind, noticing your thoughts. And noticing your thoughts as they're connected to everything that you are bringing in through your five senses. So beginning to notice any of the sounds that you hear. Noticing the sounds that might seem close. And then noticing the sounds that may seem far. And then although eyes may be closed, what do you see? Do you notice any colors, any shapes, any shadows or patterns? Without judgment, without agreement or disagreement, just noticing what you see. And then slowly shifting your attention to any of the sensations that you feel. Noticing where in your body you feel warm. Noticing where you may feel cool. Noticing the difference between the heaviness in your body and the lightness. The comfort and the discomfort. And again, not judging, not agreeing or disagreeing, but just simply noticing. And then as you take your next breath in through your nose, what do you smell? And if you smell anything at all, is it familiar or is it unfamiliar? And lastly, swallow and taste the flavor in your mouth. It is through these five senses that you are constantly communicating with the world around you. And it's through these five senses that the world comes in, potentially meeting or not meeting our needs. But as we sit here right now in this moment, I invite you to notice who it is that's been listening to my voice. Just silently and quietly listening to my voice, or observing the shapes or the images, or noticing the tastes, all that is coming in. Do you sense that there is in fact a presence? A presence that is even watching the thoughts that is behind the thought. And if so, then just for today, we can call this our soul or our spirit. Or even if you just choose to call it me, myself, witness. Just recognizing from this place that from here, looking within, there's no changing. That if I sat long enough, I would realize that from this place, my deepest desires, my greatest talents, my dreams. They've been there my entire life. That is the essence of who you are, beyond the body that is always changing, the mind that is always changing, the experiences that are always revolving. But today I sit back in silence in the part of me that is not doing, but the part of me that is being. And because I know that the qualities of this place are consistency, safety, and security, that I can quietly affirm to myself as I sit back in this seat of witness that I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. So you may choose to continue to use that as your affirmation today, anchoring yourself into this deepest truth of who you are. Or you may choose to go one step further today or in some day beyond this day, that in knowing who I am, that as I re-enter the world, I re-enter from this space, being mindful, being observant, asking questions, being a great listener, consciously choosing my choices, my words, and my actions. And I ensure that I do that from the space of heart, not from the thoughts in my head, but from this place of heart, because it is there where my witness sits. The sound of your heart center, the frequency of your heart center is the sound of yum, yum, yum. And so as we sit together in silence for the next 90 seconds, 90 powerful seconds, choosing your centering thought and quietly repeating it to yourself again and again. Either I am safe or yum. And I'll watch the time for you. And I'll bring you back when time is up. Enjoy. Very slowly starting to come back to your breath. But really focusing the breath in the center of your chest and into the heart. And doing so without forcing the breath, but just kindly asking it to move into this space. To begin to soften anything that has felt heavy or restricted. Nourishing and energizing this space, or shall I say this seat of witness. Taking that breath into the center of the heart, and as you exhale, breathing all the way back down through the legs, into the feet. You slowly start to move the feet and the toes around. And even start to bring some gentle movement into your legs as well. Inhaling into the heart, taking that breath down through the arms into the hands. Start to move those fingers, the hands, the wrists, circle them all the way around. And you may even want to inhale to reach the arms above the head. You can take an exhale, just stretch over to one side. Inhale back up to center. Exhale as we stretch to the other side. And inhale up to center. And as we exhale, let's bring the arms out in front of us, palms together, and just start to move those palms. So start to rub the palms, creating a little bit of heat here. And so as you come back, and you can gently begin to open your eyes. At the beginning of our talk today, I mentioned just how important it is to start to move a lot of that stored energy in our body that has taken us into a state of chronic stress. If you're still rubbing your palms, keep rubbing them. One of the best ways that I have learned to do this is through a practice called Qigong. Qi is another word for the energy or the life force within our bodies. And we start to turn that up. You can feel the heat in the palms of the hands. And you can either use a nice flat palm, or sometimes I make a soft fist. And I just slowly start to knock some of the energy, or I can rub it a little more firmly, as though you don't have a towel and you're trying to dry off. And do that through your entire body. And what you'll notice, if you take a minute or 2 minutes to go through the whole body, you can even make sure that you get up to the head, or you give it a good scrub, is that after you've done that, keep going. After you've done that for a minute or two, the moment that you stop, you can almost feel this tingliness throughout your body. A beautiful sign that it's like shaking a snow globe, that we've moved a lot of the energy. And the last way that we now need to release it is back through that breath. So typically I'll take 3 or 4 nice big deep breaths in through the nose, same way we came into the meditation. Exhale. 2 more in. Exhale. Last one in. And exhale. There we go. All right. How you feeling? How you feeling? Just notice what came up for you in that, right? Meditation is not about having no thoughts whatsoever. It's about starting to notice our thoughts. And as we begin to create space, what you'll notice is new thoughts, new ideas, new things will begin to come through for you as well. This is a practice, you guys. So whether you felt that, oh my God, that was the best thing that I've ever done, or, oh, that was the hardest thing that I've ever done, it's a practice. So I really encourage you. So 5 minutes, okay? Every day, all that we do is we go from body, mind. If you just think body, mind, spirit, right? What's the biggest part of me, or the most obvious part of me, to the most subtle part of me? Body is that I'm moving my body and I'm getting it going, discharging the energy, doing a body scan. Mind, I go through the 5 senses. Why? Because I notice what I'm listening to, what I see, what I feel. It's one of the best ways to slowly start to come into spirit and to say, okay, who is it that was noticing that? And from there, you can create your affirmation or your mantra. How do I want to feel? What am I working towards? Something you believe in. Or you can just find a meaningless mantra. Today, we use the sound of the heart. The sound of the heart is yum, like yummy. It's the root of yummy, or I think that's why we came up with the word yummy. It's just yum. And then the last piece is just to make sure that you always come out nice and slow, just as you go in nice and slow. And meditation timers are helpful, right? So sometimes I'll just set the timer on my phone and make sure I put on do not disturb so nobody's texting me or calling me during that. But if I'm committing to sit for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes, that way, even if I'm having a very wild day, and you guys, I've been practicing consistently for over 20 years now, there's days where I can't even sit still for 35 seconds. That I can promise you, where I'm so angry or I'm just so antsy or agitated that there's no way that I can sit, but I still force myself to sit there even for 5 minutes that day because I know that those practices build one onto the other. All right. Are there any questions that anybody has right now? You are so, so welcome, Ella. I really hope that this was helpful for everybody. It is my mission in this lifetime to not only bring the practice of meditation to people, but to bring all of the knowledge and the education behind, because I feel like rightfully so, there are so many incredible apps and guided meditations out there now that we can do. But even though they're giving us the experience, it's lacking everything else that I had just shared with you. And there's more to learn and there's more to know, but it lacks the context, right? Like, how is this helpful? How does this actually allow me to heal in my life or to really approach life from a much more mindful perspective? So your homework then today, I always give homework, but your homework today and this day going forward is to start to become far more aware of when you notice yourself starting to get stressed out, is to go through those questions. Is this a threat to my survival? Which one of these 5 psychological threats is this? Is this true? How do I know that it's true? Is there something else that I can do about it? And I know that it will help you the same way that it's helped so many other people that have been through this program as well. So you are so welcome. I'm so grateful that all of you have tuned in. I think you're absolutely, I might just hang out for half a minute, but I will share. So if anybody has any questions or anything and they want to connect privately, kind of offline here, I'm absolutely open to doing that as well. The best way to reach me would be through my email address, which is mandy@lifestylemeditation.com. Mandy@lifestylemeditation.com. And then alternatively, alternately, you have my name here. It's Mandy Trapp, and you can find me through Facebook and Instagram, and you can always send me a private message or a DM. And I'm here to point you guys in any directions that you need to go into. All right, so I hope that this provided a bit of maybe a different understanding about what meditation and mindfulness really is and how it can truly help to support you right now. And with everything that we are navigating in the world, I think this is the time, especially for people who are so highly empathic, meaning that you're feeling the energy of everybody, right? And the anxiety is high, the depression is high. There's no shame in that. There should never be shame in any of that. Asking for help and more info, yes, is always really important. So digging into these types of things is important. All right, you guys.